Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Al. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm in the Disney Town of Celebration, right behind the movie theater. And I thought it'd be a great place to start a new series that I'm going to be doing, which is going to be called Iconic Brooklyn Movies. And with no further ado, the iconic Brooklyn movie that I want to talk about today is actually 1976's movie Taxi Driver. Now I know a lot of folks out there are going to say, well, that movie was filmed in Manhattan, but it was about 25% filmed in Brooklyn, and since Travis always said he was willing to drive everywhere, I think it qualifies as a Brooklyn movie. So here we go, Taxi Driver starring Robert De Niro. So to me, beyond being put into the Library of Congress and listed as maybe the 31st best American movie of all time, Taxi Driver for me is one of those movies I call my desert island movie. You know, if someone said to me you could pick 10 movies to go on a desert island with, this would be one of my favorite movies to bring on the desert island. And the reason I say this is because if you look at history and you look at how things were done in terms of movies, Taxi Driver was probably one of the first movies, being it was made in 1976, it was one of the first movies to really address post-traumatic stress disorder from veterans coming home from the Vietnam War. And of course, Travis Bickle, the main character of Taxi Driver, was an honorably discharged Marine who served in Vietnam, who was a loner, and he was a person who came to New York City, and he became a taxi driver. And the story basically revolves around him and his struggle to kind of, I guess, maintain his sanity in a city of that was actually really in a bad state at that time. If you remember back to the 1970s, now I know myself, coming from Brooklyn, this was one of the places like Times Square, which you saw a lot of in this movie. That wasn't put on, folks. That was real. Times Square was that in the 1970s. I mean, I remember our parents telling us to avoid Times Square like a 10-foot, you know, like it was a 10-foot pole, because you literally walk down 42nd Street or any of those surrounding blocks over there, and you were offered fake IDs, you were offered switchblades, anything went over there. And there was all X-rated movie theaters. It wasn't really a place that you'd want to go. And Travis Bickle was immersed in that world, and he got into this world. He had problems to begin with, but it was in that immersion of that world that he really started to get worse. And I want to bring out a lot of things in this video that people just tend to overlook. And of course, we can't have a long video. It's going to be like a 10-minute video. But just to keep it interesting, I want to bring out a point in this movie that very few people actually talk about. And the point in the movie I want to talk about is the patch that Travis Bickle wears on his tank jacket. He was in the Marine Corps. You could actually buy that jacket. You could buy the patch. But the patch that he wears is very significant. And I'm going to show you right here. I'm going to put the patch up for you. And I'm going to put up, I think I can find the jacket that you could actually buy. But here's what the patch looks like. So right now you're looking at that patch, and the patch, he wears this jacket pretty much all through the movie. And the patch says Gorilla Company, or I'm sorry, it says King Kong Company on the patch. And that's very significant, folks. Martin Scorsese was the director, and he didn't put that in there by accident. There was a big message of why he put that in there. So the big message of why he put that in there was, if anybody remembers the movie King Kong, which is an iconic movie that was filmed in 1939, a lot of people miss this in King Kong, but the real message in King Kong was that in the movie, King Kong comes over and against his will, and he tries to save the actress with the blonde hair, I think played by Fay Wray. And what the real meaning was in that movie was that it wasn't the actress who needed the saving. It was King Kong who needed the saving. So the message that Martin Scorsese was portraying in this was that by making Travis wear that patch, he was essentially saying that in New York City, when Travis was in New York City, it wasn't Jodie Foster, whose character's name was Iris, or it wasn't Sybil Shepherd who needed the saving. It was actually Travis himself that needed the saving. And that was the significance of that patch. The King Kong Company was fictitious. If you look that up in military patches or military units, that's a fictitious unit. That unit never existed at any time in the United States Armed Forces or anywhere else for that matter. So this was strictly something that Martin Scorsese thought up, and he put it in there for a reason. And that was the message that he wanted to portray in this movie, that this is the guy that needed the saving. Just to talk about some of the filming locations of Taxi Driver, in Brooklyn, of course, one of the main scenes in the movie was when Travis goes to the rally for Palme, and he's standing out there and he's talking to the Secret Service agent, and that scene was filmed in Brooklyn, right below the Brooklyn Bridge. If anybody knows, of course anybody knows it, it's Cadman Plaza. Now, of course, Cadman Plaza looks very different now than it did then. I mean, not that different, but of course back then they dressed it up a little for the movie. But I'm going to show you a picture of Cadman Plaza as it appeared in the movie, and then I'll show you something that of today. So Cadman Plaza was one of the filming areas of that, and that was, of course, a very significant part of the movie, because if you remember, that was when Travis actually went and tried to assassinate the candidate. So that was one of the key scenes, was in Cadman Plaza. So the second key scene that was filmed in Brooklyn was the scene where Travis meets Easy Andy, when Travis actually goes and buys the firearms. If you look out of the window, and I'll put a picture on here right now, that was filmed from a hotel or a building that overlooks the promenade area, which is like right near, it's actually right behind Cadman Plaza. That's the cars that you see driving along that road, those cars are actually driving on the BQE, and that part of the BQE is right before the Brooklyn Bridge. Obviously, you're familiar with that road. If you're not familiar with that road and you're watching from somewhere else, then that area road is right behind where the Cadman Plaza scene was filmed. And of course, the Brooklyn Bridge goes right over to Manhattan. So the filming locations of the movie were relatively close together. I mean, those two scenes in Brooklyn were filmed right over there. And then, of course, a lot of the scenes that were filmed in Manhattan were filmed on 42nd Street and 34th Street, 14th Street. A lot of those scenes were filmed over there. And so it was relatively close filming. You know, the film didn't have a high budget. The budget of the film was $1.9 million, which I guess was a decent amount of money for 1976. But today, that wouldn't even pay for a second-rate actor's salary on a movie. Another amazing thing about the movie, folks, was the cast. Now, I'm going to throw up pictures of the cast right here. Obviously, Robert De Niro was in the movie, so obviously it's a picture of Robert De Niro. Of course, the other big star in the movie was Sybil Shepherd, who was on her way up at that time. I believe at that time, Sybil Shepherd was actually dating Elvis Presley. She did date him. I think she was dating him at that time, but it's neither here nor there. So Sybil Shepherd went on to be a great, big, famous actress as well. Another person in the movie was Harvey Keitel. Harvey Keitel played of course, the guy standing in the alley, in the doorway, and he was the pimp in the movie. But here's a picture of Harvey Keitel in the movie, how he looked. Everybody knows Peter Boyle, of course, from Everybody Loves Raymond. He's very popular from that movie. And then finally, probably the upcoming star in the movie was, of course, the next person. And of course, who could forget the next person? 12-year-old Jodie Foster, who went on to be in a lot of really great movies. Of course, Silence of the Lambs, over and over and over. There's so many movies that she was in over the years, and she became a really, really big star, and of course still is. And of course, Bob De Niro obviously still is a huge star. Many of these people are still stars. And there was also a lot of other actors in the movie who were had bit parts, who kind of went on to play decent amounts of careers in Hollywood. What was amazing, folks, too, was the movie was written by a guy named Paul Schrader. And Paul Schrader actually thought this movie up on his own, and it was, the movie is basically, in a sense, a dissection of how it is to be a cab driver. Now, today it's probably not as bad, but it's probably similar. How it's kind of like, at the time, was like this male-dominated profession, and it was like the one man in his cab against the world kind of thing. And that's the movie that that's what the screenplay was that Schrader had written, was this kind of like this guy out there, and he thinks he's God's only man, and he's kind of like, it's him in his cab kind of against the world, and he kind of has these people enter his cab, but really the people really don't enter his life. They kind of stay beyond like the fringes. And it isn't until he meets Sybil Shepherd, who he decides to kind of save, and of course Jodie Foster, who he meets, that he decides to kind of save, that those are the first real people that really enter his world. Because Travis apparently has problems. He's got post-traumatic stress disorder. He mentions in the movie that he's got parents, but that he's lying to the parents. He's telling them that he's working for the government. He kind of sends them like a card for their birthdays and stuff, maybe their anniversary, but it's clear in the movie that he doesn't really have a close contact with them. He's thinking of them, but he's really way beyond the fringes, even with the parents as well, which of course adds to his complete isolation. And finally, folks, like all good movies, a lot of people, you know, and you always know when there's a good movie when people kind of have controversy of the ending. So the ending of Taxi Driver is always kind of a mystery. This might be a great reason to go back and watch it or rewatch it. And if you haven't watched it ever, I'm surprised you stayed on the video this long, but I appreciate it. The end of the movie is very significant because some people say that the end of the movie is a dream. Now, not to give away the ending, I'm assuming most people have seen this movie, but if you remember, Travis becomes the hero at the end of the movie. And at the end of the movie, it shows him recovering, and once again, he's there. He's kind of a hero with his taxi cab friends, but once again, he's driving the cab. And a lot of people say that ending was actually a dream, that he actually died in the movie, or that he was still in the hospital and he was imagining this is how it was. But according to the writers and according to the director and everybody who's associated with the movie, it wasn't intended to be a dream, that ending is meant to be a reality. But the ending is very significant because the ending of the movie is kind of like the way the movie begins, with Travis in the cab, and the lighting is very similar, and he picks up Betsy and he drops her off. But the significant thing about the ending is that when the movie ends, you see Travis driving along, and all of a sudden his eyes focus on something, and it's like a very intense kind of stare. And what the significance of that meant was that Travis was, even though he survived that big ordeal, the meaning of the end of the movie was that he was just basically back to the beginning again. He hadn't gotten over his post-traumatic stress disorder. He was still driving the cab. He was still in the same situation. Of course, maybe now he was a little more famous. But the ending of the movie was essentially, you know, here we go again. He's in the cab. He's driving. He has his eyes focused on something. So the ending meant that this was probably going to happen again, and probably next time he wasn't going to be so lucky and end up being the hero. He'd probably end up doing something again, and this time probably not surviving it. So that's the significance of the end of the movie. Great movie. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this talk on Taxi Driver. Definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. I appreciate you watching. And folks, we're going to be starting a foundation within, hopefully by September. We're waiting for the 501(c) number. We're actually working on a website as we speak. It's going to be for suicide prevention. Unfortunately, my son Matt left us last August. It's left a big hole in my heart, and I can't tell you the loss. I mean, it's every parent's worst nightmare to lose their child. But instead of focusing on the negative, which I do many times, I'll admit there's some days that I'd rather not get out of bed, but thankfully, my wife and I, we have each other, and we have very supportive families and friends, and we go to grief counseling, and we're doing the right thing. So speaking of the right thing, we are trying to make a smile into a frown. We're gonna make, his nickname was Waffles because that was his name he picked up in high school, right here in Celebration. If you didn't guess already, I'm sitting in Celebration. I think I said it already, but he's a cute type of guy, and he was a brilliant guitar player. So the foundation is going to be called the Waffles Foundation. It's going to be, the nickname is going to be, it's the Waffles Foundation, and the symbol is, or the slogan is, saving lives through music one note at a time. We're going to be giving out musical instruments to kids in need. We're going to have a suicide prevention foundation. It's going to be a legitimate 501(c)(3) foundation. If you could subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. The channel is monetized now, so any money I make on this channel will go toward the foundation 100%. So just stick around and please support either or both, because this is a terrible thing in our country, folks. I mean, Travis Bickle, the main character in Taxi Driver, of course, is fictitious. But, when they made that movie, there were hundreds of guys, apparently, who wrote into Paul Schrader, and they said, how did you find out about me? How did you know my life? There's a lot of people out there like that, folks, and it's not just, young people. My son was 27. He was a musician. I don't know why musicians leave at 27. I never thought my son would be in the 27 club, but he is. But there's just a hell of a lot of people out there, old, young, veterans, you name it, every 40 seconds in America. And now with COVID and unemployment and all these things going on, it might be lower than every 40 seconds. So we're going to have this foundation. We're going to do our very best to save as many people as we can. And of course, we're going to need your support. So please visit our page on Facebook, the Waffles Foundation. Our website, like I said, is being worked on. Should be up and running soon. And hopefully we'll have our legitimate 501(c) number by September, we're hoping. And then we're going to start doing some percussion for prevention, some good work. So, folks, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. This is Al signing off from Celebration, Florida. And do yourself a favor, watch Taxi Driver. It's a magnificent movie. I mean, who could forget that classic scene of Travis talking to himself in the mirror? You know what I mean? That's so iconic. You know, you talking to me? You talking to me? Yeah, of course I'm talking to you. But folks, have a great day. I'm going to go home and get some sleep now. I'm working grave shift these days, so I'm going to go home and get some sleep, do some editing on this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop me a line, drop me a comment. I could be reached at Connection at Kindred Souls of Brooklyn, or now through the Waffles Foundation. Wafflesfoundation@gmail.com. Have a great day, folks. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye now.